My name is Diana, and I'm 33 years old. Most people see me as the quiet financial advisor who never rocks the boat. That changed last Thanksgiving. I still remember the exact moment crystal glasses catching the light turkey steam rising, and my mother's voice cutting through it all. Your sister is twice the woman you'll ever be. No one expected what happened next. Certainly not my sister, when I mentioned the $80,000 I had secretly paid for her perfect wedding. Before we dive into this family drama, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. Hit the like button if you've ever been underestimated by family, and subscribe to catch more stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Seattle, where rain tapped against windows as consistently as my mother's comparisons between me and my sister. Our family home was a split level with blue siding and carefully tended hydrangeas out front. Picture perfect from the outside, just like the image my mother worked so hard to maintain. From the beginning, Natalie was the golden child. 3 years older, naturally blonde, and effortlessly charming. She embodied everything my mother valued. "Look how Natalie makes friends so easily," my mother would say while I sat quietly with a book. "Why can't you be more outgoing like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. I wasn't unhappy exactly. I had my own strengths. Math came naturally to me, and I loved the certainty of numbers. By sixth grade, I was solving algebra problems for fun, while Natalie was being crowned middle school homecoming princess. Dad would sometimes find me working through equations late at night and sit beside me, not saying much, just being there. Those quiet moments were worth more than any loud praise. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Diana," he'd say before heading to bed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. High school crystallized our family dynamic. Natalie was prom queen captain of the cheer squad and universally adored. I was editor of the school newspaper and math team captain. When I won a statewide economics competition my junior year, my mother's response was, "That's nice, dear," before quickly changing the subject to Natalie's latest boyfriend. Dad took me out for ice cream that night, though. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. We ate our sundaes in comfortable silence. When college application time came around, I applied to several prestigious business schools. My mother scoffed when I mentioned majoring in finance. "Finance? What kind of life is that for a woman staring at spreadsheets all day?" She shook her head. "You should consider something more suitable, like teaching or nursing. Something that will help you find a husband." I still remember the sting of those words, how they implied my worth was tied to marriage rather than my own accomplishments. Dad stayed quiet during these conversations, his eyes apologetic, but his mouth firmly shut. Despite my mother's disapproval, I was accepted to Northwestern with a partial scholarship. The night before I left Seattle, I found my father standing in the doorway of my bedroom. "Your mother means well," he said softly. "She just doesn't understand people who are different from her." Then he handed me an envelope. Inside was $5,000 money he'd been saving without telling my mother. "For emergencies," he said, "or opportunities." College was liberation. For the first time, I could be myself without constant comparison. I thrived in my finance classes, secured competitive internships, and built a network of friends who valued my analytical mind and dry humor. During those years, phone calls home became increasingly rare. When I did call, my mother spent most of the time updating me on Natalie's life, her new apartment in Portland, her promotion at the marketing agency, the men she was dating. After graduation, I accepted a position at a financial advisory firm in Chicago. The distance from Seattle wasn't coincidental. I established my adult life with minimal family interference, calling on birthdays and holidays, visiting at Thanksgiving and sometimes Christmas. Each visit home reinforced my decision to keep my distance. My achievements were consistently minimized while Natalie's life choices were celebrated, as if she'd discovered the cure for cancer. Over the years, I built my career methodically. I earned my CFA designation, accumulated clients, and developed a reputation for sound ethical financial guidance. My apartment overlooking Lake Michigan wasn't flashy, but it was mine, paid for with money I had earned through work. My family never fully understood or appreciated. Last September, I was promoted to senior financial advisor, the youngest in my firm's history to reach that level. When I called home with the news, my mother interrupted my explanation to tell me about Natalie's latest Instagram post that had gotten over 1,000 likes. Dad got on the phone afterward and congratulated me, asking questions about what the promotion meant. It was something, at least. As Thanksgiving approached last year, I packed my suitcase with the usual mix of resignation and duty. The week before, I'd spent hours selecting the perfect hostess gifts, an expensive bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from a boutique winery, and a pumpkin cheesecake I'd baked from scratch following a gourmet recipe. The perfect armor for walking into the battlefield of family dynamics. The night before my flight, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror rehearsing responses to the inevitable questions. No, I'm not seeing anyone special right now. Yes, I'm still at the same company. No, I don't work too much. Yes, I'm still happy in Chicago. Little did I know that this Thanksgiving would be different from all the others. That for once, I wouldn't swallow my words with mashed potatoes and gravy. That this time, the truth would finally come out. 6 months before that fateful Thanksgiving, I received an unexpected call from Natalie. It was unusual for her to contact me directly. Our communications typically happen through group family texts or during holiday gatherings. "Diana, are you busy?" Her voice sounded uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Just finishing some client portfolios," I said, saving the spreadsheet I'd been working on. "What's up?" What followed was a 20-minute monologue about Natalie's dream wedding to Ryan, her boyfriend of 2 years. They'd gotten engaged during a sunset sail in the San Juan Islands, complete with a photographer hidden on board to capture the moment. The diamond was 3 carats, the proposal story already generating hundreds of likes on social media. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for her despite our complicated relationship. "Congratulations." "Thanks," she said, before her voice dropped to a whisper. "But there's a problem." The problem, it turned out, was financial. Natalie and Ryan had fallen in love with an exclusive venue on Orcas Island, a restored historic mansion with waterfront views and a 6-figure rental fee. Add in her dream designer dress, gourmet catering, top-shelf open bar, and all the other must-haves for her perfect day. And they were looking at costs approaching $200,000. "Mom and Dad are contributing what they can," Natalie explained, "but it's nowhere near enough. Ryan's parents are helping too, but—" I waited, sensing what was coming next. "Diana, I wouldn't ask if there was any other way." Her voice cracked. "You're so good with money and your career is going so well. Could you help us? Just a loan until we get established. We'll pay you back, I promise." My first instinct was to refuse. Natalie had always been given everything while I had worked for every penny I had. Yet somewhere beneath the resentment was a stubborn desire for my sister's approval for a genuine connection that had eluded us throughout childhood. "How much are you short?" I asked, already opening my investment portfolio spreadsheet. The answer made my stomach drop: $80,000. "I wouldn't ask, but I'm desperate," Natalie continued, her words tumbling out. "The venue needs a deposit by next week or we lose our date." "And Diana, could we keep this between us?" It would break Mom's heart to know I needed help. You know how she sees me as the one who has it all together. That request should have been my warning sign. Instead, I saw it as an opportunity, a chance to be important to my sister, to have a secret bond with her, even if it was built on financial dependence. "I'll need to move some investments around," I said. "But I can help." The gratitude in Natalie's voice seemed genuine. For the first time in our adult lives, she spoke to me as if I mattered. We talked for another hour about her plans, her dreams for the wedding, her future with Ryan. It was the longest, most intimate conversation we'd had in years. The following week, I liquidated some investments and wrote the first of several checks. Over the next few months, I paid for the venue deposit, the wedding planner's fee, the catering advance, the flower arrangements, the photographer, and countless other expenses that Natalie presented as urgent and essential. Each payment came with effusive gratitude from my sister and promises of repayment once Ryan's startup takes off or after we're settled. I wasn't naive enough to truly believe I'd see that money again, but I told myself it was worth it for the relationship we were building. Natalie began calling me regularly to discuss wedding details, ask for advice on vendors, or just chat. These conversations always ended with her saying how special it was to have me as her sister, how she'd never properly appreciated me before. I soaked up the attention like a plant finally receiving water after years of drought. Meanwhile, updates about the wedding dominated family conversations. My mother called weekly with breathless reports of dress fittings and floral selections. "It's going to be the wedding of the century," she gushed, never once questioning how Natalie and Ryan were affording such extravagance on their modest incomes. As the wedding day approached, I flew to Seattle for the final preparations. The rehearsal dinner was at an upscale restaurant overlooking Puget Sound, with personalized menus and seemingly endless wine. I sat at a table with distant cousins, while Natalie, Ryan, and my parents held court at the center of the room. "You must be so excited for your sister," one of the cousins said, swirling her Chardonnay. "Of course," I replied automatically. "It's going to be beautiful." The wedding itself was indeed spectacular. The historic mansion gleamed with thousands of twinkling lights. White roses and peonies adorned every surface. A string quartet played as Natalie walked down the aisle in a custom gown that made her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale. During her vows, she caught my eye and smiled. In that moment, I convinced myself that our new bond was real, that my financial sacrifice had bought not just a perfect wedding, but a genuine relationship with my sister. At the reception, my mother found me at the bar. "Isn't this magnificent?" she said, gesturing around the opulent room. "Your sister has such exquisite taste. She's always known exactly what she wants and how to get it." I nodded, biting back the words that rose in my throat. She knew exactly who to ask for $80,000. As the night wound down, Natalie hugged me tightly. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. "This wouldn't have been possible without you." I wanted to believe her gratitude would translate into a changed dynamic, that my contribution would finally earn me equal standing in our family. But 3 weeks later, when I called to check in, Natalie was distant, distracted. "Sorry, Diana can't talk long. We're about to meet friends for dinner." Our conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. The pattern continued. My calls went to voicemail. Texts received brief replies hours or days later. When I mentioned visiting Seattle, Natalie always had conflicts. By the time Thanksgiving approached, we were back to our pre-wedding dynamic, with one difference: I was now $80,000 poorer. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold in Seattle. I'd flown in the night before checking into a hotel rather than staying at my parents' house. The distance felt necessary for maintaining my composure. I arrived at the familiar suburban home at exactly 2 o'clock, gifts in hand. The house looked the same as always: tasteful holiday decorations adorning the porch, a fall wreath on the front door, the scent of roasting turkey greeting me as I rang the doorbell. Dad answered, his face brightening. "Diana." He pulled me into a warm embrace. "So good to see you, sweetheart." Mom appeared behind him, looking me up and down with her critical eye. "Diana, you're looking thin. And that haircut, it's very severe, isn't it?" "Hello to you too, Mom," I said, handing her the wine and dessert. "Happy Thanksgiving." She accepted the gifts with a cursory thank you before turning back toward the kitchen. "Natalie and Ryan will be here any minute. They've brought the wedding album to show everyone." Dad helped me with my coat, giving my shoulder a sympathetic squeeze. "How's work?" he asked as we moved into the living room. "Really good, actually. I got promoted to senior financial advisor a few months ago." "That's wonderful." His genuine enthusiasm warmed me. "You've worked hard for that." The moment was interrupted by the doorbell. My mother rushed past us, nearly knocking over a side table in her haste. "They're here." The front door opened to squeals of delight. Natalie entered like a returning monarch, Ryan trailing behind her. She looked stunning in a burgundy wrap dress that complemented her blonde hair, now styled in elegant waves. My simple black sweater and slacks felt suddenly inadequate. "Mom, Dad." Natalie embraced our parents before turning to me, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Diana, you made it." I stepped forward for a brief perfunctory hug. Wouldn't miss it. More relatives arrived: Dad's brother, Uncle James, and his wife, Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, Aunt Linda, with her husband Uncle Robert and their adult children, my cousins Mark and Sarah. The house filled with conversation and laughter as drinks were poured and appetizers passed around. Mom had outdone herself with the table setting. Bone china plates rested on gold chargers. Crystal glasses caught the light from tapered candles, and a centerpiece of burgundy and orange flowers ran down the middle of the table. It was magazine-worthy, exactly as she preferred everything in her life. "Come see the wedding photos," Mom announced, ushering everyone into the living room where Natalie was already opening an elaborate leather-bound album. For the next 30 minutes, we all gathered around as Natalie narrated each perfect moment of her perfect day. I stood at the edge of the group sipping my wine and trying not to calculate how much each photograph detail had cost me. The flowers alone were magical. My mother sighed, pointing to an arrangement I knew had cost $12,000. And that venue worth every penny. I caught Natalie's quick, uncomfortable glance in my direction before she turned the page. And here's the cake cutting the baker trained in Paris. Another $8,000, I thought, taking a larger sip of wine. When we finally moved to the dining room for dinner, I found myself seated between Cousin Mark and Uncle Robert, as far from the place of honor next to my mother as possible. Natalie and Ryan sat directly across from me, their faces illuminated by candlelight. "Before we eat," my father said, standing with his glass raised, "I'd like to say how grateful I am to have everyone here today. Family is everything." "Hear, hear," Uncle James agreed. Mom stood next to her glass, sparkling. "And a special toast to Natalie and Ryan, celebrating their first Thanksgiving as a married couple. Your wedding was everything we dreamed it would be. Simply perfect in every way." Glasses clinked. I took a small sip, meeting Natalie's eyes across the table. Something flickered there. Embarrassment, guilt. She quickly looked away. Conversation flowed as platters of food made their rounds. I answered polite questions about Chicago, the weather, my apartment. No one asked about my career until Uncle James, who had always been kind to me, inquired about my work. "It's going well," I said. "I was actually promoted to senior financial advisor a few months ago." "Financial advisor," my mother repeated with a slight frown. "I still don't understand what you actually do all day. Push papers around, type numbers into computers." "She helps people manage their money, Helen," my father said with unusual firmness. "Well, it sounds dreadfully boring," Mom replied. "Not like Natalie's creative work in marketing. She just landed the Johnson account, you know. Very prestigious." I focused on cutting my turkey into precise pieces. "Congratulations, Natalie." "Thanks," my sister murmured, studying her plate. The conversation shifted to politics, then local gossip. I remained quiet, contributing only when directly addressed. The familiar feeling of invisibility settled over me like an old coat, uncomfortable but expected. As dessert was served my homemade cheesecake alongside a store-bought apple pie that received significantly more praise, Mom turned her attention to me again. "Diana, are you seeing anyone in Chicago?" "You're not getting any younger, you know." I set down my fork. "I date occasionally, Mom. I'm focused on my career right now." She clicked her tongue. "Career, career. There's more to life than work. Look at your sister's successful career and a wonderful husband. Speaking of which," she turned to Natalie, "when can we expect some grandchildren?" Natalie blushed. "Mom, we've only been married a few months." "Well, it's something to think about. You two would make beautiful babies." I took another sip of wine, wishing it were something stronger. "Maybe Diana will find someone too," Aunt Patricia offered kindly. "She's accomplished and attractive." My mother snorted, actually snorted. "Diana's always been so particular. Remember that homeless man we saw on our trip to Vancouver last year? The one with all those finance books that reminded me of Diana. All those numbers living alone with her spreadsheets." The table grew uncomfortably quiet. "Helen," my father warned. But Mom was on a roll now, the wine loosening her tongue. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. I'm just saying that Natalie has always embraced life fully. She's warm, sociable, beautiful, inside and out." She reached over to pat my sister's hand. "Your sister is twice the woman you'll ever be, Diana. It's just a fact." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt every eye at the table on me waiting for my reaction. 20 years of similar comments had trained me to smile tightly and change the subject. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the promotion I'd earned but couldn't celebrate with my family. Maybe it was the $80,000 I'd given with no recognition. Maybe it was simply that after 33 years I'd finally had enough. I set down my wine glass carefully. My voice when it came was steady and clear. That's wonderful to hear, Mom. In that case, Natalie can give back the $80,000 I spent on her wedding. Since she's twice the woman I am, I'm sure she won't have any trouble covering it herself. The silence that followed my statement was absolute. Forks froze midway to mouths. Wine glasses remained suspended. Every eye at the table widened in shock. My mother recovered first, her face flushing deep red. "What on earth are you talking about?" I maintained eye contact with her, refusing to back down. "I'm talking about the $80,000 I contributed to Natalie's wedding. The venue deposit, the flowers, the photographer, the dress alterations. Shall I go on?" "That's ridiculous," Mom sputtered. "Ryan's parents helped with the wedding, and your father and I contributed what we could." All eyes shifted to Natalie, who was staring intently at her plate, her knuckles white around her fork. "Natalie." Ryan's voice was quiet but strained. "What is Diana talking about?" My sister finally looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. "I was going to tell you," she whispered to him, "after we were more settled." "Tell me what exactly—" Ryan's confusion was rapidly turning to anger. I almost felt sorry for my sister in that moment. Almost. "Diana helped with some of the wedding expenses," Natalie admitted, each word seeming to cause her physical pain. "Some—" I raised an eyebrow. "I covered nearly half the total cost. Is this true?" My father turned to Natalie, his expression a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. Natalie nodded, a tear spilling down her cheek. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" Dad asked. "Why the secrecy?" My sister glanced at our mother before responding. "I didn't want anyone to know we needed help. I wanted everyone to think we could afford the perfect wedding on our own." "You mean you wanted Mom to think that?" I clarified. The table fell silent again. My mother's face had gone from red to white, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I think," Uncle James said slowly, "that we should give this family some privacy." He stood gesturing to his wife and the other extended family members. "No need," I said, placing my napkin beside my plate and standing. "I'm leaving anyway." "Diana, wait," my father began. "It's okay, Dad. I've said what I needed to say." I looked around the table, meeting each person's gaze. "For the record, I'm not asking for the money back. It was a gift, but I am asking for something else: respect. I'm tired of being treated like the family disappointment when I've worked hard for everything I have." I turned to my mother, whose expression remained frozen in shock. "I may not have the perfect life according to your standards, Mom. I may not have a husband or a house in the suburbs or popular Instagram posts, but I have built a successful career that allows me to help the people I care about, even when they don't appreciate it." Ryan was staring at Natalie with an expression of betrayal. "We need to talk," he muttered to her. "Now." As I moved toward the door, my father followed. "Diana, please don't go like this." I paused, softening slightly at the genuine concern in his voice. "I'm staying at the Marriott downtown. I fly back to Chicago tomorrow afternoon. Can we talk before you leave?" I nodded, surprised by the tears suddenly threatening. "Yes, I'd like that." As I retrieved my coat from the hall closet, I heard raised voices from the dining room. Ryan's anger, Natalie's tearful explanations, my mother's indignant defense of her favorite daughter. The crisp November air hit my face as I stepped outside, bringing with it a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I had spoken my truth at that Thanksgiving table. The secret was out, the dynamic shattered. There was no going back to the way things had been, and I realized with startling clarity that I didn't want to. The drive back to my hotel was a blur of streetlights and internal monologue. Part of me regretted the public nature of my revelation, knowing it had humiliated Natalie and shocked Ryan. Another part, a stronger part, felt only relief. The weight of silent resentment I'd carried for years had lifted, leaving space for something new. In my hotel room, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. It wouldn't be long before the calls and texts started. I considered turning it off, but instead set it on the nightstand and ordered room service a glass of bourbon and a slice of pie, a private Thanksgiving redo. The first text came from cousin Sarah. "That took guts. Call me when you're ready to talk." Next was Aunt Patricia. "Family is complicated. We love you, Diana." Uncle James. "Proud of you for standing up for yourself. Your grandfather would have been too." The most surprising was from Uncle Robert, my mother's taciturn brother-in-law. "Your mother was wrong. You're twice the woman most people will ever be." My father called as I was finishing my bourbon. "Are you okay?" he asked immediately. "I'm fine, Dad, really." I had no idea about the money, Diana. No idea. "I know. Natalie wanted to keep it quiet." "Why did you agree to that?" I considered the question, searching for an honest answer. "I think I wanted her to need me, to see me as valuable in some way." His sigh carried decades of regret. "I've failed you both by not standing up to your mother's favoritism all these years. I'm sorry, Diana." "You were always there in your way," I said, remembering the ice cream after competitions, the quiet encouragement, the emergency fund when I left for college. "Not enough," he insisted. "That changes now." After we hung up, I thought the next call would be from my mother, a tirade of accusations and guilt trips. Instead, my phone lit up with Natalie's name. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Diana." Her voice was raw from crying. "I am so, so sorry." "Are you calling because you're actually sorry, or because Ryan's angry and Mom's upset?" Her silence told me it was a combination of both. "That wasn't how I wanted everyone to find out," she finally said. "How did you want them to find out? Or were you hoping they never would?" "I don't know," she admitted. I wanted the perfect wedding so badly. And when I agreed to help after you asked," I corrected. "Right," she paused. "Ryan's furious. He says we lied to everyone, including him." "You did." "I know." Another pause. "Mom's blaming you. Says you ruined Thanksgiving to make yourself the center of attention." I laughed without humor. "Of course she is. Dad's standing up to her, though. I've never seen him like this. He said she needs to recognize what she's done to our family dynamics." That surprised me. "Good for him." "Diana." Her voice grew smaller. "What happens now?" It was a good question. What did happen after 30 years of family patterns were broken in a single dramatic moment? "I don't know, Natalie. I guess that depends on all of us. But I know I can't go back to being the invisible daughter anymore." After we hung up, I stood at the hotel window, overlooking the Seattle skyline, city lights blurring through unexpected tears. There was grief in this moment of truth-telling grief for the family I had wished for the relationship with my sister I had tried to buy, for the mother's love I had never been able to earn. But beneath the grief was something else, the first fragile seedling of genuine self-worth, pushing through years of family dysfunction toward the light. The week after Thanksgiving unfolded in unexpected ways. I extended my stay in Seattle by 3 days, using remote work as an excuse. In reality, I wasn't ready to return to Chicago and pretend nothing had changed. On Saturday morning, there was a knock at my hotel room door. I opened it to find my father standing there, looking both determined and uncomfortable. "Do you have time for breakfast?" he asked. We settled in a corner table at the hotel restaurant, ordering coffee and omelets before the real conversation began. "Your mother and I had a long talk last night." He started stirring cream into his coffee with unusual focus. Actually, it was more like a series of talks, some louder than others. I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "I've been complicit in this family dynamic for too long," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "Watching your mother favor Natalie, dismissing your accomplishments. I told myself I was balancing things by supporting you privately, but that wasn't enough. You deserve public recognition and appreciation, too." Why did you never say anything? I asked the question I'd wondered for years. He sighed heavily. Your mother and we have a complicated relationship. She's always been the strong one, the decisive one. I fell into a pattern of deferring to her to keep the peace. He shook his head. That's not an excuse. It's a failure on my part. Mom's never going to change, I said, surprised by the lack of bitterness in my voice. It was simply a statement of fact. Maybe not entirely, Dad acknowledged, but she needs to try. And I need to do better at calling her out when she falls into old patterns. We talked for nearly 2 hours, diving into family history I'd never fully understood. How my mother's own parents had favored her brother, leaving her determined to be the center of attention in her adult life. How she had projected her own insecurities onto me because I reminded her of herself before she had learned to create a perfect external image. None of this excuses how she's treated you, my father emphasized, but understanding might help you carry it differently. Before we parted, he hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Diana. Not just for your career success, but for your strength of character. Don't let anyone, especially your mother, make you feel less than extraordinary. That afternoon, I received a text from Natalie asking if we could meet for coffee. We chose a neutral location, a busy cafe downtown, where the holiday crowd provided a buffer of ambient noise. She looked different, smaller. Somehow, her confident facade cracked to reveal the insecurity beneath. She'd always been the pretty one, the charming one, the favorite. Yet, sitting across from me with nervous hands wrapped around her mug, she seemed remarkably human. Ryan and I had a major fight, she began without preamble. He said he doesn't know who I am anymore, someone who would lie about something so significant. What did you tell him? The truth, that I've spent my whole life trying to be perfect because that's what was expected. That I panicked when the wedding costs spiraled because admitting we couldn't afford it felt like failure. She took a shaky breath. That I've always been jealous of you. That stunned me. Jealous of me. You've always known who you are, Diana. You never needed anyone's approval. You built a life on your own terms, while I was desperately trying to meet Mom's impossible standards. I almost laughed. I've spent my entire life feeling inferior to you. I know, she said quietly, and I used that. It was easier to accept Mom's favoritism than to question it. Easier to take your money than admit we'd overextended. And now, I'm trying to figure out who I actually am when I'm not being the perfect daughter or the favorite sister. She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. This is a start. It's only $10,000, but it's what Ryan and I can manage right now. We want to pay you back in full, even if it takes time. I looked at the check she was offering, representing far more than money. It was the first acknowledgement of my contribution, the first step toward a more balanced relationship. Keep it, I said finally. Consider the money a wedding gift. Diana, no. After everything, I'm not doing it for you, I clarified. I'm doing it for me. I don't want financial obligation between us anymore. I want to see if we can build something real without it. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve that. Probably not, I agreed with a small smile. But family's complicated, right? We talked for another hour more honestly than we ever had before. About growing up as Helen and Richard's daughters, about the different wounds we each carried, about the possibility of a relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition. As we parted with an awkward but genuine hug, Natalie said, I am sorry, Diana, truly. And I'm grateful not just for the money, but for the wake-up call. Where do we go from here? I asked. I don't know exactly, but I'd like to try being sisters for real. Maybe we start by talking once a week. No mom filtering our relationship, just us. It wasn't forgiveness exactly that would take time, but it was a beginning. The most difficult conversation came on Monday, when my mother requested I come to the house before my flight back to Chicago. Dad had offered to be present, but I declined. This was long overdue. She was waiting in the living room, perfectly coiffed as always, but the tight lines around her mouth betrayed her tension. We sat across from each other like diplomats from hostile nations. Your father thinks I owe you an apology, she began stiffly. Do you think you owe me an apology? Her lips pursed. I think you deliberately caused a scene at Thanksgiving to embarrass your sister and me. That's not an apology, Mom. Well, what do you expect? You've always been difficult, Diana. So sensitive, taking everything personally. I stood up. This was a mistake. I'm not doing this anymore. Wait. Something in her voice, vulnerability perhaps, made me pause. Please sit down. I did, watching as she visibly struggled to find words that didn't come naturally to her. I may have occasionally been harder on you than on Natalie, she finally admitted. Occasionally, I raised an eyebrow. Fine. I've consistently favored your sister and diminished your accomplishments. The word seemed physically painful for her to pronounce. And that wasn't fair. It wasn't the heartfelt apology I might have wanted, but from my mother it was seismic. Why? I asked, simply. She looked away, silent for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she did, her voice had lost its usual sharp edge. You remind me of myself. The self I worked so hard to leave behind, bookish, awkward, too smart for my own good. I was determined my daughters would be different. Natalie was naturally what I wanted both of you to be. You were a reminder of what I feared. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these years of feeling inadequate, and it had nothing to do with me at all. That's not my problem to carry, Mom. No, she agreed quietly. It isn't. We talked for another 30 minutes. Not the deep reconciliation of a Lifetime movie, but the beginning of a more honest relationship. She didn't promise to change overnight, and I didn't pretend everything was forgiven. But we established new boundaries. I would no longer tolerate public criticism or dismissal of my choices. She would make an effort to acknowledge my accomplishments. We would both try to see each other as we actually were, not as reflections of our own insecurities. As I left for the airport, Dad walked me to my rental car. Are you okay? He asked. I will be, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. This is all a lot, but necessary. He nodded. Your mother is trying, in her way. I know, and I'm willing to meet her part way, but only part way. In the following weeks, unexpected changes rippled through our family. Aunt Patricia called to tell me she'd always admired my independence. Uncle James invited me to speak to his daughter about careers in finance. Cousin Sarah confessed she'd always felt invisible next to her brother Mark, creating an unexpected bond between us. Natalie and I established our weekly phone calls, awkward at first, but gradually relaxing into real conversation. She was exploring therapy, questioning patterns she'd never examined before. Ryan had forgiven the financial deception, but insisted on transparency going forward, a healthy boundary I wholeheartedly supported. My mother's transformation was less dramatic, but still noticeable. Our phone conversations remained brief, but she made small efforts, asking about my clients, remembering my firm's name, occasionally acknowledging that my financial stability was admirable. Baby steps, but steps nonetheless. Dad changed the most visibly. He called more often, asked thoughtful questions about my life, and sent articles about finance that made him think of me. More importantly, he began asserting himself in family dynamics, gently but firmly correcting my mother when she slipped into old patterns. As for me, I found a good therapist in Chicago and began unpacking 33 years of family baggage. I learned that standing up for myself didn't make me selfish or difficult, that my worth wasn't determined by my mother's approval or my sister's validation, that financial success meant little without emotional health to accompany it. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, we gathered again for Father's Day. I flew into Seattle with less dread than usual, cautiously optimistic about this new family dynamic we were all learning to navigate. The changes were subtle but significant. My mother still fussed over the table setting and asked pointed questions, but Dad redirected her more effectively. Natalie and I shared private smiles at familiar family patterns, without the old undercurrent of competition. When I mentioned my recent client satisfaction scores, the highest in the firm, everyone actually listened. Tell us more about that, Dad encouraged, and remarkably, they seemed interested in hearing it. After dinner, Natalie and I took a walk around the neighborhood summer evening light, stretching our shadows along the sidewalk. Ryan and I are seeing a couples counselor, she told me. Working through some things. It's been good. I'm glad, I said sincerely. How's the marketing job? She hesitated. I actually quit last month. I realized I was doing it because it sounded impressive, not because I loved it. Wow, what's next? I'm taking some time to figure that out. Maybe something in event planning. I did enjoy organizing the wedding even with all the stress. She glanced at me. Do you love what you do truly? I considered the question. I do. Not every day, of course, but overall I find meaning in helping people secure their futures. In working with numbers that tell stories and solve problems. You always knew yourself better than I knew me, she said softly. I don't know about that, but I'm learning. When we returned to the house, Mom was in the kitchen packing leftovers. She handed each of us a container without comment. Thanks, Mom, I said. Dinner was delicious. She nodded, and then added with visible effort, Your father told me about your client satisfaction scores. That's impressive, Diana. You must be very good at what you do. Coming from my mother, it was practically effusive praise. I accepted it with a simple, thank you. Later, as I prepared to leave for my hotel, she approached me again, something uncertain in her expression. We've set aside the guest room for you, she said. If you'd like to stay here tonight instead of the hotel. It was a small gesture, but loaded with meaning. An invitation back into the family home, a recognition of my place in the family. 6 months ago, I might have declined out of self-protection. Now I found myself nodding. I'd like that. Thank you. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom with its outdated wallpaper and high school trophies, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The revelation at Thanksgiving had been painful, messy, public, everything my conflict-avoidant self would normally hate. Yet it had been necessary, breaking open calcified family dynamics to allow something healthier to grow. Was everything perfect now? Far from it. My mother still had her moments of criticism. Natalie occasionally slipped into old patterns of self-absorption, and I sometimes retreated into protective silence rather than expressing my needs. We were all works in progress, learning and relearning how to be family to each other. But for the first time, I felt fully present in my family, rather than orbiting at the edges. I had spoken my truth, set my boundaries, and discovered that authentic relationships, even difficult, complicated ones, were worth more than $80,000, or any number of perfect Thanksgiving dinners. The most valuable lesson hadn't been about standing up to my mother or exposing my sister's secret. It had been about recognizing my own worth independent of external validation, about understanding that real connection comes through honesty rather than appeasement. As adults, we can't change the families we were born into. We can't rewrite our childhoods or magically transform difficult relationships. But we can change how we engage with those relationships moving forward. We can choose authenticity over approval, self-respect over silent resentment. Sometimes it takes a dramatic moment like revealing an $80,000 secret at Thanksgiving dinner to break patterns that have defined us for decades. And sometimes, in the uncomfortable aftermath of such moments, we find something we've been seeking all along, not perfection, but truth. Not adoration, but respect. Not the family we always wished for, but the authentic connections that become possible when we finally stand in our own light. Have you ever had to speak a difficult truth to your family? How did it change your relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your voice and setting boundaries. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply tell our truth, especially when it's uncomfortable. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand in your own light.